The pilot's face drained of color as airport security surrounded him on the tarmac. Just 20 minutes earlier, he'd forced a black passenger off first class. Now he stood frozen, watching that same man step out of a black sedan flanked by corporate attorneys. The passenger owned the entire airline. His career was about to end in ways he never imagined, and the phone in his pocket kept buzzing with messages from headquarters demanding answers he couldn't give. Before we dive into this incredible story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from right now. Are you Team Justice or Team Second Chances? Hit that like button if you believe actions have consequences, and don't forget to subscribe because stories like this remind us why speaking up matters. Now, let's go back to where this all started, because what happened 24 hours earlier would change everything. LaGuardia Airport buzzed with early morning energy. Travelers rushed through security checkpoints, dragging suitcases and clutching coffee cups. Gate 17 hummed with the quiet anticipation of Flight 447 to Atlanta, scheduled to depart at 6:30 a.m. Andre Washington moved through the terminal with practiced ease, his 4-year-old daughter Zoe sleeping peacefully against his shoulder. At 35, Andre had mastered the art of single fatherhood. He wore faded jeans, white sneakers, and a Navy Howard University hoodie. Zoe's small fingers clutched Mr. Patches, her beloved stuffed giraffe, while a pink blanket draped over her tiny frame. They boarded early, taking advantage of the family boarding option. Andre had specifically chosen seats 2A and 2B in first class. The tickets cost $2,400, but his daughter's comfort mattered more than money. He wanted Zoe to sleep through the flight, and the wide, reclining seats would give her that rest. The first-class cabin sat nearly empty in the pre-dawn quiet. Soft lighting created a peaceful atmosphere. Andre carefully settled Zoe into the window seat, adjusting her blanket and making sure Mr. Patches stayed secure in her arms. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. He smiled, brushing a curl from her forehead. Sliding into seat 2A, Andre pulled out his laptop. A merger acquisition needed his review before the Atlanta meetings. Documents filled his screen as he began reading through financial projections and legal frameworks. The cabin remained blissfully quiet. Heavy footsteps approached from the cockpit. Captain Roger Hammond emerged, clipboard in hand, conducting his pre-flight inspection. At 52, Hammond carried himself with rigid authority earned through 28 years of flying. His silver hair gleamed under the cabin lights. His uniform bore multiple commendation pins. Hammond's eyes swept the cabin in routine assessment. Then they landed on Andre. His expression shifted. The professional neutrality vanished, replaced by something colder. Suspicious. His jaw tightened as he changed direction, walking deliberately toward row 2. "Excuse me." Hammond's voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut. "Those seats are reserved." Andre looked up from his laptop, confusion flickering across his face. "I'm sorry. First class is for premium members." Hammond's tone suggested he was explaining something obvious to someone slow. "I need to see your boarding passes." Andre blinked, processing the request. He'd flown first class hundreds of times. Nobody had ever questioned his presence. "Is there a problem with my tickets?" "Just show me your boarding passes, sir." The word "sir" dripped with condescension. Andre pulled out his phone, navigating to his digital boarding passes. 2 tickets. Seats 2A and 2B. First class. Purchased and confirmed. He held the screen toward Hammond. The pilot took longer than necessary examining the passes. His eyes narrowed. He scrolled through the information multiple times, clearly searching for some discrepancy, some error he could exploit. The seconds stretched uncomfortably. Other passengers began boarding. A white couple in their 60s walked past, expensive luggage rolling behind them. Hammond's entire demeanor transformed. His face brightened. Warmth flooded his voice. "Mr. and Mrs. Patterson." wonderful to see you again. Welcome aboard. Your usual seats are ready in row 1. He gestured graciously, treating them like royalty. The couple smiled and thanked him, settling into their seats with practiced comfort. They were clearly regulars, valued platinum members who flew this route frequently. Hammond turned back to Andre, and the warmth evaporated instantly. "Sir, there's been a mistake with the seating assignments. These seats are needed for operational purposes. I'm going to have to ask you to move to economy." Andre's stomach tightened. He kept his voice calm, measured. "Captain, my daughter is sleeping. We paid full price for these seats. What operational purpose requires us to move? That's not your concern." Hammond's voice rose slightly. "I'm the captain of this aircraft. When I give an instruction regarding seating, passengers comply. Now, I need you to gather your belongings and move to the back of the plane." More passengers filed past. Some glanced over, sensing tension. A few pulled out their phones, pretending to check messages but positioning cameras toward the confrontation. Andre felt Zoe shift against him. Her eyes fluttered. The last thing he wanted was to wake her with an argument, to frighten her with raised voices and conflict. He looked at his sleeping daughter, then back at Hammond. The pilot's expression held absolute certainty. He believed himself untouchable, righteous in his authority. Andre recognized that look. He'd seen it countless times throughout his life. The look of someone who'd made a decision based on nothing but appearance and assumption. "Fine." Andre's voice came out quiet, controlled. "We'll move." Relief and satisfaction washed over Hammond's face. "Good decision. I appreciate your cooperation." Andre began carefully gathering their belongings. His laptop. Zoe's small backpack with snacks and toys. Her blanket. He moved slowly, trying not to disturb her sleep. Hammond watched, arms crossed, as if supervising a necessary but unpleasant task. As Andre stood, cradling Zoe against his chest, the pilot added one final comment. "Next time, fly an airline that matches your budget." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Several passengers audibly gasped. A woman in row 3 covered her mouth. 2 business travelers in row 4 exchanged shocked glances. Andre paused mid-step. He turned slowly, meeting Hammond's eyes with an intensity that made the older man's confidence waver for just a fraction of a second. Something flickered in Andre's expression. Something dangerous and controlled. Something Hammond didn't recognize but should have feared. Then it was gone. Andre's face smoothed into careful neutrality. Without another word, he carried his sleeping daughter down the narrow aisle toward economy. Helen Porter, the lead flight attendant, had watched the entire exchange from the galley. Her face burned with shame. She knew what she'd witnessed. She knew it was wrong. But she said nothing, did nothing, just wrung her hands and avoided eye contact as Andre passed. Economy class sprawled before him, rows of cramped seats already filling with passengers storing carry-ons and settling in for the flight. Andre found seats 24B and 24C. The middle and window seats in a 3-seat row. The aisle seat was already occupied by a heavy-set man whose snoring suggested he'd started his vacation early. Andre maneuvered carefully into the middle seat, trying to position Zoe by the window without waking her. The seats were narrower. The armrests felt cheap and wobbly. One didn't retract properly. The seat in front of him bore stains from previous passengers. The overhead bin was already full, forcing him to stuff their bags under the seat, eliminating what little legroom existed. Zoe woke up confused. Her eyes opened slowly, taking in the different surroundings. "Daddy? Why aren't we in the comfy seats?" Andre's heart cracked. He forced a smile. "Change of plans, sweet pea. This is our adventure seat. Look, you can still see the window." But you said we'd have the big chairs that go back. I know, baby. Sometimes plans change. But we're together, right? That's what matters. Zoe's lower lip trembled, but she nodded, trusting her father completely. She settled against him, Mr. Patches tucked under her chin. Within minutes, exhaustion reclaimed her and she drifted back to sleep. Andre sat in the cramped middle seat, his knees pressed painfully against the seat in front of him. His mind raced, but his face remained calm. He pulled out his phone, putting it in airplane mode, but not before composing a message in his encrypted notes app. Captain Roger Hammond. Employee 47,893. Flight 447, LaGuardia to Atlanta. 6:30 a.m. departure. He saved the note and put his phone away. Then he sat in silence, holding his daughter, planning his next moves with the same strategic precision that had built him an $8 billion fortune. The plane pushed back from the gate right on schedule. Captain Hammond's voice came over the intercom, smooth and professional, welcoming passengers aboard Flight 447. He sounded competent, friendly, like everyone's favorite uncle. Nobody listening would guess what had happened just minutes before. Andre sat in seat 24B, his long legs folded awkwardly in the limited space. The man in the aisle seat continued snoring, his shoulder encroaching into Andre's already minimal personal space. Zoe slept fitfully against the window, her small body unable to get comfortable in the rigid seat. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with their safety demonstration. Helen made eye contact with Andre once, guilt written plainly on her face, but she quickly looked away. What could she say? What could she do? She needed this job. Speaking up against a senior captain meant risking everything. As the plane climbed to cruising altitude, Andre's mind drifted backward through time, retracing the path that brought him to this moment. South Atlanta, 27 years ago. A small apartment that always smelled like his grandmother's cooking. Miss Lorraine Washington, 68 years old with hands weathered by decades of hard work, had raised him after his mother died giving birth to his younger brother, who'd only survived 3 days. His grandmother cleaned office buildings at night. She'd leave at 8 p.m. and return at 6 a.m., her knees aching, her back bent, but her spirit unbreakable. She worked so Andre could have school supplies, decent clothes, a chance at something better. Education is freedom, she'd tell him every morning before school. Nobody can take what you know. Learn everything you can, baby. Learn it all. He devoured books. Math, science, history, everything. His teachers noticed. They pushed him toward magnet programs, gifted tracks, opportunities. He earned a full scholarship to MIT, studying computer science and electrical engineering while working 3 part-time jobs to send money home to his grandmother. She died during his sophomore year. Heart attack. Alone in their apartment. He found her when he came home for Thanksgiving break. The grief nearly destroyed him. But her last words to him, spoken over the phone the night before she died, kept him going. Make me proud, baby. Build something beautiful. So he did. He threw himself into his studies with manic intensity. He graduated top of his class. He moved to Silicon Valley with $700 in his pocket and a laptop held together with duct tape. His first company, Nextech Solutions, started in a studio apartment he shared with 2 other MIT grads. They ate ramen noodles for months. They coded 20 hours a day. They built cloud infrastructure that solved problems corporations didn't even know they had. Within 3 years, Fortune 500 companies couldn't function without their technology. The buyout offers started rolling in. At 28, Andre sold Nextech for $2 billion. $2 billion. He could have retired. Bought an island. Lived in luxury forever. Instead, he invested in struggling startups run by founders who looked like him. Black entrepreneurs, Latino innovators, Asian American developers who've been passed over by traditional venture capital firms that only funded people from certain schools, certain backgrounds, certain zip codes. 3 of those companies became unicorns, billion-dollar valuations that changed industries. His investment portfolio grew exponentially. By 30, his net worth exceeded $5 billion. By 33, it passed $8 billion. But money hadn't protected him from heartbreak. Simone, his college girlfriend, the love of his life, died giving birth to Zoe. The parallel to his own mother's death shattered him. History repeating itself in the cruelest way. He'd held newborn Zoe in the hospital, watching her tiny chest rise and fall, and made a promise. He would be enough. Mother and father both. He would give her everything. For 2 years, he barely worked. He hired nannies but did most of the parenting himself. Midnight feedings. Diaper changes. First steps. First words. He documented everything, knowing Simone would never see these moments. When Zoe turned 2, Andre started working again, but differently. He invested in companies that mattered. Educational technology. Healthcare access. Environmental solutions. He used his wealth as a weapon against inequality, funding scholarships and community programs across the country. A year ago, an opportunity emerged. Skirich Airlines, drowning in debt, outdated planes, and terrible service ratings. Most investors saw a sinking ship. Andre saw potential and a chance to make a difference in an industry notorious for discrimination complaints. He purchased 70% controlling interest through shell companies and investment funds. He stayed anonymous, operating through trusted executives and lawyers. He didn't want publicity. He wanted results. He replaced the CEO with someone who understood both aviation and equity. He invested hundreds of millions in new planes, better training, improved worker conditions. He raised wages for baggage handlers, flight attendants, gate agents. People who kept the airline running but were treated as expendable. The company rebounded. Customer satisfaction scores improved. Stock prices tripled. Financial analysts called it a miracle turnaround. Nobody knew Andre Washington controlled it all. He valued privacy, especially for Zoe. He flew commercial instead of private jets because he wanted her to grow up understanding how regular people lived. He dressed casually because designer labels meant nothing to him. He lived in a nice but not ostentatious house in a diverse Atlanta neighborhood where kids played basketball in driveways and neighbors knew each other's names. This trip to Atlanta was personal. His grandmother's sister, Great Aunt Pearl, turned 90. She'd helped raise him after Miss Lorraine died. Zoe needed to know her family history, understand where she came from. Andre had specifically booked the early morning flight because it would be quieter. He'd paid for first class because Zoe could sleep comfortably. He'd planned everything carefully. He hadn't planned on Captain Roger Hammond. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Washington." Andre turned. A young black woman across the aisle leaned toward him. She wore glasses and a Howard University sweatshirt, her natural hair pulled back in a colorful wrap. Recognition lit her face with excitement and disbelief. "I'm Whitney. Whitney Hayes. I heard you speak at the Tech Inclusion Summit last year. Your keynote about breaking barriers in Silicon Valley changed my life. I applied to graduate programs because of that speech." Andre smiled, genuinely pleased despite the circumstances. "That's wonderful. Where are you studying?" "Georgia Tech. Computer Science PhD track. I start in the fall." She paused, her expression shifting to concern. "Mr. Washington, I saw what happened during boarding. What that pilot did. That was completely wrong." Andre glanced at Zoe, still sleeping. "It's not the first time something like this has happened." Whitney's eyes widened. "Seriously? But everyone in tech knows who you are. In tech, maybe. But out here? Andre gestured around the economy cabin. I'm just another black man who someone decided doesn't belong somewhere. Are you going to do something about it? File a complaint? Andre's smile turned enigmatic. I'm always doing something about it. Just not always in ways people see immediately. Whitney didn't fully understand, but she nodded. Then she looked at Zoe, curled uncomfortably against the window. Your daughter shouldn't have to be cramped like that. This is ridiculous. She can have my window seat if you want. I'm in 23A. At least she'll have more room. The kindness in the offer touched Andre deeply. That's very generous. Are you sure? Absolutely. Nobody should be treated like that, especially not a little kid. They carefully switched seats, moving Zoe without waking her fully. In the window seat of row 23, she had slightly more space. Whitney settled into the middle seat of row 24 with a book, giving Andre and Zoe some privacy. Andre made a mental note. Whitney Hayes, Georgia Tech, Computer Science PhD. When she graduated, he'd make sure she got interview opportunities at every company in his portfolio. Kindness deserved reward. The flight continued. Flight attendants came through with beverage service. Andre asked for water. Helen served him quickly, still unable to meet his eyes. Guilt radiated from her like heat. Andre pulled out his phone, careful to keep it in airplane mode but accessing downloaded documents. He opened his encrypted messaging app, typing a message to be sent the moment they landed. Gerald, I need a complete file on Captain Roger Hammond by the time we touch down. Employee history, flight records, passenger complaints, HR files, social media presence. Everything. Also, schedule an emergency board meeting for tonight. This ends today. He saved the draft message and put his phone away. Then he sat back, watching clouds drift past the window, his mind already 3 steps ahead, planning moves like chess pieces on a board Hammond didn't even know existed. 90 minutes later, the plane descended through Georgia's humid air. Atlanta's sprawling cityscape came into view, the skyline glittering in morning sunlight. Captain Hammond's voice came over the intercom, thanking passengers for choosing Zurich Airlines, reminding everyone to remain seated until the seatbelt sign turned off. Andre gathered their belongings slowly, letting the crush of departing passengers thin out. Zoe woke up cranky and confused, asking again why they'd sat in the uncomfortable seats. Andre deflected with promises of pancakes at Aunt Pearl's house. They were among the last passengers to deplane. The first-class cabin sat empty now, the wide seats that should have been theirs already cleaned and reset for the next flight. Andre walked past them carrying Zoe, his expression neutral. Captain Hammond stood at the cockpit door, as pilots traditionally did, nodding politely to departing passengers. He'd said goodbye to the Pattersons warmly, joking about seeing them on the return flight. He'd chatted with business travelers, thanked families, maintained his professional, friendly demeanor. When Andre approached, Hammond's expression went cold. He offered the barest acknowledgement, a slight nod, his eyes already dismissing them and looking past to see if any other passengers remained. Andre stopped directly in front of him. Captain Hammond. The pilot looked at him with barely concealed irritation. Yes. I'd like your full name and employee identification number. Hammond's eyebrows rose. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by amusement. Excuse me. Your name and employee ID number. I'm filing a formal complaint about your conduct this morning. Hammond actually laughed. A short, sharp bark of derision. A complaint? Seriously? He crossed his arms, his body language radiating condescension. Sir, I've been flying for 28 years. I have a spotless record. Not a single mark against me in nearly 3 decades. But sure, go ahead. Waste your time. It's Roger Hammond, employee number 47893. The complaint department has an online form. Knock yourself out. Andre pulled out his phone and typed the information carefully. Hammond watched with undisguised amusement, clearly viewing this as theater, a meaningless gesture from someone with no real power. Helen stood nearby, pretending to check overhead bins but obviously listening. Her face had gone pale. She knew this was wrong, knew Hammond had crossed a line, but she remained silent. Hammond leaned closer, lowering his voice to a patronizing whisper that only Andre could hear. Let me give you some advice, friend. Airlines have certain standards. Certain expectations. Maybe next time, book economy from the start. It saves everyone the trouble of these uncomfortable conversations. You fly within your means, and we don't have situations like this morning. Andre's jaw tightened, but his voice remained perfectly calm. Captain Hammond, do you believe you're untouchable? The question seemed to confuse Hammond. I believe I know my job. I believe I understand aviation and passenger management. I've been doing this since before you were born, probably. That's not what I asked. Do you believe you're untouchable? That your actions don't have consequences? Hammond's amusement faded slightly. Something in Andre's tone, some quality he couldn't quite identify, made him uneasy. But he shook it off, reasserting his confidence. I believe the airline backs its captains when they make appropriate operational decisions. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a turnaround flight in 90 minutes. I need to complete my post-flight checklist. Andre held his gaze for a long moment. Captain Hammond, enjoy your next 90 minutes. Make them count. The words were simple, neutral, but something about the way Andre said them sent a chill down Hammond's spine. For just a second, doubt flickered in his eyes. Who was this man? Why did he seem so calm, so certain? But the moment passed. Hammond straightened, reasserting his authority. Have a nice day, sir. Andre shifted Zoe to his other shoulder and walked off the plane without looking back. Hammond watched him go, a vague uneasiness settling in his stomach that he couldn't quite explain. As soon as Andre stepped into the jetway, his phone reconnected to the cellular network. Messages flooded in. Emails. Texts. Notifications. He ignored most of them, scrolling to his encrypted app and hitting send on the message he drafted to Gerald Chin. The message went through instantly. 3 dots appeared immediately as Gerald started typing a response. On it. How bad? Andre typed quickly with one hand while carrying Zoe with the other. Bad enough. Full investigation. I want everything by 3 p.m. Understood. The board meeting. 7 p.m. tonight. Conference room A, full executive team. Done. Andre pocketed his phone and headed toward baggage claim. Zoe was fully awake now.